Gospel is one of the hardest passages to understand if we don't understand it in context, because Christ says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Of course, this is the same God who instructed in the Old Testament, in the Ten Commandments, to honor father and mother. So why is he instructing us here, or why is he saying here, if anyone comes to me and does not hate, cannot be my disciple? I want to start off with a story. Maybe it's theoretical, maybe it's history. We'll find out soon enough. But there was a patriarch long ago. His nephew became patriarch after him. So a pope, Coptic pope, and then his nephew became also the Coptic pope. So together, they reigned for 60 years, almost 60 years. They were pope, they were leaders for about 60 years. They were both very holy saints. Of course, no one is perfect, but they were very holy saints, and we'll mention their names soon, if they're real. But because they reigned for so long, their family unfortunately had members that were not acting in a Christian manner. And they started maybe dealing with the properties of the Coptic church in ways that it shouldn't be dealt with. And they started messing around with church money, church affairs, at the end of this second patriarch's life. Now comes in a new patriarch. His name is Dioscoros, Pope Dioscoros. And he comes in and he's dealing with a very tough situation. First off, the family wanted to keep the lineage going. Pope, the first one, and then his nephew became Pope. So we're talking about Pope Theophilus, and then Pope Cyril, the pillar of faith. They wanted to keep the lineage going. Satan, unfortunately, was working. So the family was not very happy that a very good, saintly man named Dioscoros, Pope Dioscoros, became the patriarch. And they started slandering him, talking behind his back, going all the way to the capital in Constantinople to give the officials there bribes in order to try and take control of Egypt, of the Coptic Orthodox Church. They went as far as to accuse Saint Dioscoros himself of heinous acts, of acting unjustly. And does Saint Pope Dioscoros ever answer back? Nothing. History records for us nothing that Saint Dioscoros answers back with. When Pope Dioscoros was asked, and what we have from his writings, all address the faith. Even when they accused him and they made such a big buzz to the point where they made the Bishop of Rome turn against Pope Dioscoros eventually. And they sided with the Bishop of Rome in it's an utter act of betrayal in something called the Council of Chalcedon. Of course, very theologically important. But also, unfortunately, there was pus. There was, unfortunately, some non-Christian stuff going on. But the unfortunate fact is Pope Dioscoros was accused in this council of things he never did. Accused of things ethically that he never did. Accused of being overzealous and kicking people out of churches and doing things that he never did. And he just stood there in this council, and the moment they started bringing these accusations, and one of the first accusations was, you have betrayed the faith and you have betrayed the canons of the fathers, the laws of the land. And he's like, okay, everything I've ever done or I've ever written or I've ever decreed, is written, including the council that you're accusing me of, called Second Council of Ephesus, but we can discuss that another time. Read those minutes. Tell me what I did wrong. I'm not going to defend myself. You go read the minutes. Tell me. You have the minutes with you now, don't you? They did have the minutes. Read them. The slander against him, the wave against him was so strong to a point where, while he kept insisting, he said it 2 times in the beginning and then another time later on, if I remember correctly. Well, no one read it. No one would read the minutes. No one wanted to prove his innocence. But he kept quiet about himself. And all he talked about was the faith. All the letters that he eventually wrote from exile were about the faith, concerned first and foremost with the faith. Okay, why are we talking about this? Well, this story repeats throughout history. If I didn't say names, maybe you would have thought it's the current patriarch. Or you could have thought it's Pope Kyrillos VI. People were going out against him, his own children, in his own church sometimes, speaking out against him. Potentially his mother, his brother, his children spiritually, all of these, of course. They were writing in magazines against Pope Kyrillos. The secret police in Egypt actually went to Pope Kyrillos because Pope Kyrillos at some point, full of God's grace. So the president was a fan, of Pope Kyrillos. He wanted to please Pope Kyrillos. So he sent the secret police to Pope Kyrillos and told him, just say the word. We'll end these magazines. These publications that are coming out slandering you, we'll end them. And Pope Kyrillos did not speak a word. Today's gospel says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. I would like to just title this reflection, Carrying the Cross and Counting the Cost. Carrying the cross and counting the cost. First and foremost, let's contextualize a little bit. In Luke 14, this is the passage we read from today, when Jesus said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children, right before it, Jesus is speaking about a very specific parable. Jesus says, a man once gave a great banquet and invited many. And at the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. One said, I have bought a field. Another, I have brought 5 yoke of oxen. Another said, I have married a wife. This is all Luke 14. Eventually, Christ says on verse 24, for I tell you, none of these men who were invited shall taste my banquet. They all had excuses. Some of them seemed valid. Somebody had a field, maybe he had to guard it, or it was time to sow or to receive the crops. I mean, it's valid. You're potentially doing that for your family. Somebody had cattle. Somebody had a wife to take care of. But unfortunately, the priorities were not straight. Therefore, Jesus said at the end, for I tell you, none of these men who were invited shall taste my banquet. The very next verse then goes and says, now a great crowd accompanied him. This is the gospel of today. Now a crowd accompanied him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So this is the context. Jesus is speaking about the priority of love. My love for Christ, my love for God, in comparison with everyone else. Of course, he's instructing me all over Scripture, to love everyone. But my love to everyone, in comparison to his love, it can't even be on a balance. It needs to break the balance. If I'm loving everyone endlessly, selflessly, to the end, how much more should I be loving God? I should be loving God to a point where if somebody looks at both of these love, and he starts assessing them, he's like, wow, he loves God so much, it's almost as if nothing else matters. It's almost as if he hates everyone else. Of course, that's not the case, but you get the idea. God is not on top of our priority list. He is the list. I love my wife through the love that he gave me and the love he poured on me. I love my children because of the love he put in my heart and everything he gave me. So it's just the fountain starts with him, and he opens the fountain of grace, of love, as we'll discuss very shortly. But when he opens that fountain, I love everyone through him. I have a priority list, God, family, school, or work, or whatever. God is not on the list. God is enacted in every part of the list. I honor and love God endlessly when I love my family, when I love my neighbor, when I work properly and for love, yeah, etc. Okay? God is not on our list of priorities. He is the list. I do everything from my love to Him through the love and dedication that He gave me, through the breath that He gave me, through the grace that He gave me. I love Him because He loved me first. Carrying the cross and counting the cost. Christ again said in today's passage, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Carrying the cross is a must. Otherwise, we don't pass through His death and resurrection. Gaining through Him and with Him the power over death through the cross. Sometimes we forget, we celebrate birthdays all the time. So a topic that's been on my mind. But we don't really celebrate death too much, do we? In our society, at least. Everyone here will die. That's just a fact. Everyone here will journey towards death. Why do we avoid the subject then? If we're all going to just go through this, why avoid the subject? Well, that's what Christ is teaching us. The cross is a journey leading to what? Golgotha. Yeah? Carry the cross means I have the end in mind. While everyone goes through birth and death, we're willing as humans to discuss our birthdays, but not death. We will all go through it. And that's why a church follows God's example. And when Christ says, you take up the cross and follow me, the church puts in front of us everyone who did that. For example, Saint Mina, the saint of today. His end was always in front of him. He knew this end is coming. But he also knew if he holds on to Christ and carries his cross, the cross is not the end of the story. The cross, all of a sudden, instead of a shameful sign of death, it becomes a glorious sign of victory. Saint Mina, the saint of today, went through it and lived while remembering his death. He remembered his death. He began with the end in mind. He began with the cross. St. Paul in the Pauline today, 2 Thessalonians, he says, we are bound to give thanks to God always for you, brethren, as it is fitting, because your faith is growing abundantly and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. Therefore, we ourselves boast of you in the churches of God for your steadfastness and faith in all your persecutions and in the afflictions which you are enduring. The cross, yeah? In all your persecutions and afflictions you are enduring. This is evidence. The persecutions and afflictions, the cross. This is evidence of the righteous and of the righteous judgment of God, that you may be made worthy of the kingdom of God for which you are suffering. The cross is there to make us worthy of the kingdom of God for which we are suffering. Same theme repeats in the Catholic epistle. I'll skip a little bit just for the sake of time. But verse 7 says, but the end of all things is at hand. Therefore be serious and watchful in your prayers. And above all things, have fervent love for one another. For love will cover a multitude of sins. This idea of keeping the end in mind, keeping the cross in mind. Because we're going to go through death anyway. Might as well go through it by way of the cross. Because when we go through it by way of cross, carrying what God gave us from the cross. And notice Christ said, each one has his own cross. Carry your own cross. Everyone's cross is going to be a little different, but it's going to come with its reward. Christ is reminding us that we need to have this goal in mind. Imagine you're carrying the cross. Christ carrying the cross on the way to Golgotha. What was he thinking about? He has such a heavy cross after being whipped, a maximum penalty already. And he's heading towards Golgotha. What does he have in mind? Us. Love. He knows his end. He's been journeying on earth the entire time in awaiting, this moment. Are we the same? Are we carrying the cross? Just like the saints that I just discussed earlier. Like St. Pope Dioscoros. Like St. Cyril. Like St. Cyril VI, Pope Kyrillos. Some people in our world today reject this concept of thinking of death, thinking of the cross. Even, they sometimes deny even the concept of judgment altogether. Maybe even they say that everyone is saved at some point. Universalism, for example. Saint Severus of Antioch, who's a saint from the 5th century, is very much against this idea. And he speaks about the people who reject this cross, who reject to carry God in them, who reject the power of God. He says, for even if this person who rejects, even if he should live 100 years or more than this in this world and pass all of this time like this in vanity, it should be known that if he were able to live without end, remaining without dying, he would not desist from So he mentions a lot of sins. So he said he would not desist from any of lewdness, any malice, and any disgraceful things. Okay, and that leads to a disgraceful life, which consists of lust. Okay, meaning what? He's saying even if God gives a person who is living in sin all eternity with him, so God just lets us not die. We just keep living. People who reject God will keep rejecting God. People who love God will keep repenting and returning to God. God takes us away from this life when He knew and when He knows that we have made our final decision. No matter how many times more Michael falls, he will keep getting up. He loves me. That's it. Or, in the case of, somebody who doesn't love God, God knows when He takes him, you know what? No matter how many times I give him more, he's never going to come back to me. He's just going to keep rejecting me over and over and over. We can go on that point for many days, but I'll skip for the sake of time also. The Acts of today shows us what it means when you carry the cross and then you see the end in mind. What happened in Acts 5 today is that the apostles were beaten. They were preaching, and then all the Pharisees and the Jews gathered up, and they decided, you know what, we need to give them a nice beating to make sure they don't carry their cross again. They don't preach enough. It says, verse 41, so they departed from the presence of the council after the beating. So they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for His name. And daily in the temple and in every house they did not cease teaching and preaching Jesus as the Christ. Very important verse that is listed very early on in this same chapter. We don't read today. But Christ said, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. When we count the cost is everything. Now great multitudes accompanied him, and Christ's response was to tell them that they must hate their father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters. Yes, even their own life, so they can be his disciples. That's the cost. It's very costly. It's a cost, man. It's not something to take light of. And as Christ is saying, well, we got to make sure we account for the cost. As Christ was saying through St. Paul in Ephesians 6, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, over demons, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. The whole armor of God, again, is loving God with all our hearts. Yeah? And our love for God needs to be to a point where when everybody looks from the outside, it looks like we're hating everything else. Yeah? Counting the cost. The very important verse that explains this whole chapter comes at the very end of today's gospel, which says, so likewise, whoever of you who does not forsake all cannot be my disciple. Whoever of you who cannot forsake all does not denounce all, he cannot be Christ's disciple. I was thinking about my own sins yesterday, and honestly, this whole counting the cost thing was overwhelming on my conscience. I mean, I can count the cost, but I always fail. I still sin again. I decide, you know what, I'm going to be with God. I'm going to give my whole life. But then I sin, and I fall. The cost did not get me the result that I need. Do we feel that at some points? I think at some point in life we'll feel that, yeah? Well, is it enough? Is what I'm doing enough? I'm doing everything I can. I'm giving my 2 cents. I am trying to carry the cross with the Lord. He says, take up your cross and follow me. He says, love me more than all. I am trying. I'm not always succeeding. And there comes the psalm of today. The psalm today is such a beautiful prayer and is very theologically rich as well. The psalm says, it's a prayer, and the psalmist is saying, but you, Lord, are a God full of compassion and gracious, full of grace, long-suffering and abundant in mercy and truth. Turn to me and have mercy on me. Give your strength to your servant and save the son of your handmaid. The answer is in the psalm. He is the God of all grace, compassion, long-suffering, mercy, and truth. He will count the cost with us. He will carry the cross with us. He said, take the cross and follow after me. He's not going to leave us. And even though, personally, I fail every day, well, the hope is he will count the cost with me. It always amazes me. The 2 examples that Christ gave was, the first, he's talking about building the tower and finding the cost. Okay, and we discussed that. But the second example, he's speaking in the gospel today, he's saying, or what king going to war against another does not sit down first and consider whether he is with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? In this example, who are we? Are we the king with 10,000? Have you ever thought about that one? It's kind of a weird example here. If Christ is trying to, tell us, that, the enemies maybe are the evil ones, so why is he saying make peace with them? Or how does that work? Well, maybe, just maybe, with all our efforts, even when we try to fulfill the commandment to the max and carry the cross fully, like Saint Mina, like Saint Dioscoros, like Pope Kyrillos VI, all the saints we've discussed today, maybe we'll still fall short. Maybe we're still 10,000 only. Maybe we only have an army of 10,000. And the one coming against us is 20,000. But then Christ says right after, in the next verse, that all we have to do is just forsake all. Forsake all. When you forsake all, you remember the story of Gideon. You forsake everything. Forsake even the 10,000. Forsake the army. I will carry you. I will count your cost. I will carry the cross with you. I will make my presence felt. Do we have enough commitment, zeal, and desire and will for God? Am I really trying? If I am really trying, that's an A+ in God's book. If I'm repenting, that's an A+ in God's book. That's all he wants. Because he will carry. He knows that our maximum is 10,000. And the ones against us are 20,000. He will carry the rest. He will carry the load. He will fulfill us. He will finish to the end. And as Christ said in John 16, truly I say to you, you will weep and lament. That's just the reality of this life. There is suffering. There is a cross. But the world will rejoice. You will be sorrowful, but your sorrow will turn into joy. When a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered a baby, she no longer remembers the anguish. The cross after resurrection, it's an amazing, amazing scene. For joy that a human being has been born into the world. So also you now have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. In that day you will ask nothing of me. Truly I say to you, whoever of you asks of me in my Father's name, he will give to you. Until you have asked nothing in my name. Let's ask him. Lord, I have 10,000. I'm not able to fulfill this command. It's hard for me. To hate father, mother, wife, children, brother and sister. Tell him, Lord, I'm asking. You said, ask and you will receive, that your joy may be full. This is in John 16. he eventually ends John 16 by saying, I have said this to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. Be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Let's carry the cross and count the cost so we're not surprised halfway. We will be ostracized. We will be left out. People will look down on us. Even if people who respect us sometimes will distance themselves from us because, well, this road seems too hard. Are we ready for that cost? Because the reward is there, and the reward is ready for us. Let us all pray the psalm of today. But you, O Lord, are a God full of compassion, and gracious, and long-suffering, and abundant in mercy and truth. O turn to me and have mercy on me, Lord. Give your strength to your servant, and save the son of your handmaid. Help us to love you first and foremost, our beloved Lord. Help us to count the cost, and to know that the cost is worthy, and to carry our cross. And if we can't, help us to build, help us to carry, help us and count the cost with us, and overcome the evil one for us in your name and through your cross. Christ will answer us, as we said in John 16, in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, and take heart. I have overcome the world. Glory be to God forever. Amen.